Growing up in the Caribbean, I never gave much thought to what raising a child would look like outside of the region. Now I've been thrust into that very situation, sometimes happily and other times wondering if I'm making a mess of things. Well, on today's episode of Caribbean Bird Stories, I've decided to compare notes with other Caribbean women, specifically three Trinbagonians, and how they are raising their children outside of the Caribbean, having been raised within the region. First up is Naette, a doctoral candidate at the University of Maryland, researching rhetorics of race. Her work considers the impact of commercial genetic testing on maintenance of white supremacy in multiple global contexts. As an instructor, Naette teaches public speaking and the rhetoric of Black America to undergraduates in the UMD Communication Department. Before returning to academia in 2015, Naette spent 15 years working as a print and television journalist, advertising strategist and copywriter, speechwriter, and corporate communication specialist in Trinidad and Tobago. Next, we have Kiola Toussaint. Kiola works in risk management at a federal financial regulatory agency. We have to be hush hush about this one. She's an amazing mother of a 7-year-old boy and a lover of travel, food, and fun experiences. She sometimes documents her challenges and wins via their family IG at Bobbins and a Backpack. It's a mouthful, but I'll put it in the show notes so you can all check it out. And her blog, Walking Through the Fog. The latter talks about her quest to parent by faith and all the things she's learning along the way. Last but certainly not least is Daniella Joseph, a cognitive behavior therapist in Bedfordshire, UK. And I'm so excited she's the first person from the UK that I've interviewed on this podcast. So welcome, Daniella. She is the mother of two beautiful young ladies, a 4-year-old and soon to be 6-year-old. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi. Okay, so I know that this chat, I did something similar on season 2 where we had this fireside chat, and I just really enjoyed having the input from just not just one guest, but multiple guests. So I thought for season 3, I wanted to approach it again, and but with a different spin. So last time it was women who didn't want to have children necessarily, but this time I'm like, okay, let's look at women. We know the Caribbean diaspora is huge, right? And a lot of us are raising children outside of the region. So it poses many challenges and also opportunities. So I really just wanted to hear from each one of you how you came to be even living outside of the Caribbean. So let's go with Naette first. Naette, tell us, how did you come to be living outside of the Caribbean?
Right. So as my bio says, I, you know, left to go to school, left to go back to school after working in com for a really long time. I sort of realized that there were gaps in my theoretical understanding, the way I conceptualized communications. And so I thought that the best thing to do would be to get a master's degree. And so I left after going to UE, like so many others. I went to Villanova University. And then after my time at Villanova, I realized that there was potential for a PhD in my topic, which was, pretty sexy in that moment. And so I, headed over to UMD to start that. Of course, a PhD is what it is. 5 years later, this is my 5th year. 5 years later, I'm just wrapping up my dissertation. But in the meantime, I just turned 40 in November. I had to do things, you see, going in and leaving. Like I had to do some things, and one of them was, having a child. And so, I never thought I would live here. I don't have a driver's license because I never thought I would live here. Right. And now I have to get one. There's some things for a long time. I had no pictures on my walls. I was just trying to go through my academic training and then go back home. But then you have a baby, you find a partner, and you begin to live life. You begin to have insurance. You begin to have debt, and you think, oh, wow. I'm now a resident of the United States. I'm a tax resident. I pay tax like Americans now. I can file online, unlike international students who have to file on paper, right? And so I I found myself here. I don't know what happens next, but I do know that at least the first 3 years of my son's life will be as an
Okay.
American.
Right. And just tell me where, for our listeners, where you are right now.
Right. So I'm in Maryland. I'm not far from the university. I've lived in College Park, Maryland since I moved here. I was
Okay.
very lucky in that I was able to live 7 minutes from the building where I teach and go to school and did classes. And
Yeah.
so as a pregnant person, I was able to walk to class like in the
Okay.
early fall
Yes.
comfortably, not
Yeah.
have to commute and that type of thing. So that's where we are now. And
Right.
yeah,
And you have one boy.
I have one boy. His name is Buria. Buria
Mm-hmm.
means storm. His dad is Bulgarian, and so he also teaches. He was at UMD when I met him, and so my son is Bulgarian and English speaking as much as he speaks, and
Right.
so we gave him a Bulgarian name to sort of honor
Mhm.
that tradition, and then we gave him my dad's name to honor my side, and so yeah,
Okay.
he's a nice little blend of
Yes.
the choices that I've made.
Lovely. I am going to switch it up and let's go to Daniela.
Please
Hi.
remember the question.
Yeah,
I have mad
that's
brain as
fine.
well.
No problem. So I just want to know how you came to be living in the UK. A little bit about what you do.
Yeah. So I did my undergrad in psych in Barbados, and I knew I wanted to do psychotherapy. This wasn't entirely sure of the modality. And
Right.
did an internship in the States, and I found out about cognitive behavior therapy. And I thought to myself, okay, that's exactly what I want to do. So I went online, and they offered in the UK a terminal master's. It just means that you don't have to do your full PhD to be able to
Right.
practice. So I was like, amazing, 1 year, and I get to do what I really want to do. So
Mm-hmm.
I moved up in 2010
Right.
with my now husband. We've been together since we met in UB in Barbados, so very, very long time.
Long
And he's like,
time. Yeah.
I don't want to do more long distance because we did long distance when I was in the States. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, no problem. So we came up, and I literally had no intention of staying here. It was
Mm-hmm.
literally going to be 3 years, as in do my master's for 1 year and get some experience. Because it's really important to me that if I'm doing something, I'm doing it authentically and to the best of my ability. And I'm still here. I love what I do. And
Mm-hmm.
here just has the perfect opportunities to grow and develop as a therapist. And I worked with NHS for a little while, which is our kind of our national health service. And now I work in a private company doing CBT still, which I absolutely love. And I genuinely never thought I would be so far from home raising
Right.
children. That is the honest truth. I always knew I wanted to have kids, but I never once ever thought that it would be how many miles away from what I still call home.
Yes.
So, yeah, but we're
Yeah. And
settled
is
now.
your husband also from Trinidad?
No, he's
Oh,
from St. Vincent. So he was in his final year of uni when I was in my first year
okay.
university. Yeah.
Oh, okay, nice. And so let's go to Miss Kiola. Because, yeah, those glasses,
Oh,
Kiola.
I have a light here that I want to put on. Is that okay?
Sure, go
It's a
ahead.
second light because I'm really having a hard time with seeing you guys and how this
Oh,
is appearing on my end. So I wanted to see if this makes a difference or not for you
no
guys.
problem.
Do you
Can
see
you?
any material difference or no? Not really.
Not really, but
Mm,
if you
okay.
can see us better,
I
then
can. I can see you a little bit better.
okay.
Can you repeat our question, please?
Yes, not a problem. Briefly tell us how you came to be living outside of the Caribbean.
Oh, that is a long, much longer story than each of
Oh,
you.
Lord.
Um,
Hmm.
very colorful story.
Okay.
So when I first left Trinidad and Tobago, I moved to the Midwest, which surprisingly is where I live now.
Mm-hmm.
And I had several detours to the life that I'm leading right now. So I went to school in the Midwest. I came out for school. And then after that, I did a lot of things in between. I took a break from school. I worked in the film industry in Trinidad and Tobago for a couple of years. I had a small business. I did makeup. I did wardrobe on some filming. I just did anything that my heart desired. Having
Yeah.
children was never part of the equation. And when you have children, it forces you to be able to make different decisions about what supports you, because no child, no strings or anything. So I was able to kind of float around and do things that I liked, because I've never really honestly had a passion for anything but traveling and just making enough money so that I can travel. So years ago, because I have a 7-year-old, when I had my son, I chose to go back to school and complete my degree. So I did a business degree at New Jersey City University, graduated with honors, did a lot of hard work raising my son, because I am a single parent. And when I was finished with school, I got recruited by a federal agency to work in a bank examination role, which is the regulatory agency I work with now. So once my son was about 2.5, we started traveling full time for this agency. And in that role, provided oversight on site to financial institutions to make sure that they were in compliance and not practicing risky financial practices and decisions with their money, which is our money, consumers' money. So we did that for about 3 years, and we spent pretty much, I want to say, 3 weeks a month on the road. Until I knew my son needed to start school in kindergarten. And so I looked for an opportunity where I could come off the road and not do that kind of job, because it was just so stressful, and it affected the way that I was going to be able to parent him and support him while he was going into school. So I got into a position, it's an HR function in the agency, same division of risk management in the same federal agency, but just on an HR side. So I'm no longer traveling. And to get that position, I had to relocate back to the Midwest, and I'm now in the state of Missouri. So it's a little more sedate. It's very, very different. We're not spending 6 hours on the road each way, traveling Mondays and Fridays, or flying here or there, or staying in hotels for 6 or 7 weeks at a time while I worked. And of course, it was very complex in terms of finding childcare for him on the road all the time, because it was just him and I. So we grew a lot. We grew a lot together. And I'm very grateful that we have landed where we've landed now in Missouri, where I can take him to school every day, and I have a position that allows me to have something that is in one place, so I don't have to travel as much as we used to. And that's why I'm here now in Missouri. So
okay, nice. Well, thank you, ladies. That's just a comprehensive introduction to everybody. I love it. And I mean, I just love the vast, like the differences amongst all of you in terms of the reasons for why you're there, the reason why you're staying. I think a lot of people are going to resonate with, the different reasons. So I like that. In terms of parenting now, so you have different ages. Naette, you have a 2-year-old, Daniella, 4 and 6, Kiola, 7. So different stages of development. And we know that when children are before puberty, they change literally every year in terms of what they're able to do, their level of independence, how much they listen or don't listen. So, I mean, your approach has to match basically, their age. So what is your parenting style like? I'm just going to call on anybody, but what's your parenting style? Would you say you're more Caribbean? So, children should be heard and not seen. Yeah, should be seen and not heard. I got that wrong. Yes, children should be seen and not heard. Or is it more of, all-inclusive? Tell me about your style. Anybody, actually. Okay. Naette.
I'll go. So this is something I struggle with, to be very, very honest. There are a lot of things that I practice here that I know I would not practice at home. And I think that is in part because there's a lot of influence outside of the home. Community is not the same, right? I mean, we have a fantastic babysitter who's from Jamaica. Our babysitter before that was from Grenada, right?
Oh,
and
nice.
so we were very fortunate to have Caribbean people around us. But typically our neighbors, our colleagues are American. Their children are American. And so that culture is pervasive, right? It will affect what my son sees. He also has an older sister. His dad was married before we met. And so she's a huge influence on his behavior. And some things, as we know, cannot stand, right? They just can't stand. And it's difficult to not make him feel like you're punishing him, right, for being what he sees everybody else be. And
Right.
so 2 ways in which this is a big deal for me. First one is diet, right? When I was growing up, and my memories of childhood are very scattered, right? Very vague. But I
Right.
do remember that when you came home from school, you might have got a little snack. But then at dinner time, around 7, when the news was going
What's
on, the
going on?
adults
Yeah.
cooked something to eat. And you
Yeah.
ate what they cooked. That was
Yes.
it, right? If it was corned beef and rice, it was corned beef and rice. If it was callaloo, it was callaloo. You don't eat it, you don't eat it, right?
Correct. You didn't have options.
Here is,
Mhm.
what do you want for dinner? Let mommy make you what you want for dinner. And so from very early on, I got sucked into that. And now we have mac and cheese. And it hurts me. It hurts me to feed my child Velveeta, okay? Because I know that there is ground provision in the world. I know that there's callaloo in the world. I know that there's, things to be had that are significantly more nutritious and that he would be used to if he was at home, but he's
Correct.
not. And so, every now and then I'll try to slide something in, slip something in, fry a piece of fish, break it up and see if he'll take it. But as a 2-year-old, and we know that they can be very, very picky at that age, his diet, I think, is the best example of the struggle between, do I raise my child as a Caribbean parent and do I raise my child as an American child? The other thing is licks. So my mind has changed a lot about since I had a child, right? It's a little baby when you first get the child. It's a little baby. You just want to protect, you just want to love, you just want to hug up, right? But my son is defiant. So one day I pinched him, and a couple days later I said not to do anything. He goes, "Well, pinch me," right? And so he's very defiant, and it's something I want to nurture and direct because I think everybody needs a little fire in them. And I think that it'd be wonderful for him to have. But to draw the line, like what is the line of punishment? His father is not into licks at all. He thinks it's barbaric. All my relatives who are older than me, who beat me senseless, now all of a sudden, licks is bad how you beat the child. I don't particularly want to spank, but I don't have any tools, right? Except having these long conversations that American parents have, how do you feel? And really what I want to do is ring your ears and put you to sit down in the bedroom and think about what you've done. And so it's not one or the other, but it's a constant negotiation of how much comes from home, how much comes from here, which is better, what can he take, what can I take, and the people around us.
Yes. And I think, you brought up so many points there that I can relate to, right? That spanking thing is a huge one. And we can talk about it a little bit later in terms of the tools, some of the tools that I've found that have been a bit helpful, but it's a challenge. Does Daniela, do you have anything to add to that conversation?
Yeah, it is tricky. It is so tricky. I think that, the eldest one is almost 6, and I didn't know how to thought to myself, what do I do, right? I think I've tried like everything and tried to figure out what works. We tried timeouts, but I feel like that's really isolating. Especially when they're very little, it's hard to help them to understand the impact of their behavior. I think we kind of have this thing. My husband and I were like, okay, when you're in the house, it's just the Caribbean. I know outside is England, but inside is the Caribbean. So there are things like he talked about how some things don't fly. Some things just don't fly in my house, like the talking back and call people by their first name. I'm not done with that, right? So
Right.
honestly, like I listen, my friends' kids call me Daniela. I don't like it at all. I'm not your friend. I'm not your friend.
No, we didn't grow
So
up together. Yes.
it really bothers me. But I make my children call my friends auntie or uncle. I think it's just more respectful. They're not your friends. You need to be respectful. So that there are things like that I've instilled in them. They're like, but they're not my real aunts. I'm like, doesn't matter. Like they're our family friends.
Respect.
Exactly. And I think even though I'm a therapist, I get angry too. I'm a human being. I have to remind people of this. That I experience frustration and anger and and so much guilt about being so far from home and all of these things. And for me, I feel at this point in my parenting journey, I'm very much about kind of reflecting with them. So not just saying that's wrong, but saying like, how would you feel if your sister did this to you? And I get them to identify the feeling and they say, well, I would feel sad. Okay, well, do you think you should be doing that right now? Like, let's think about this together. There are times I have to be sharp and say, don't do it because I'm not going to tolerate it. Like things like running into the parking lots. I mean,
Yeah.
listen, I am not going to be one of those parents saying 5 times, oh gosh, listen, no. If you get knocked down, you're going to die. So I am very direct about, we are in a parking lot. It is dangerous. If you get knocked down, we have to go to the hospital. If you have to go to the hospital, you have coronavirus right now. Nobody wants that. So can you please listen, because I'm not talking again. So I think I just try my appropriate and I assess the level of risk and danger, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And do you think your work as a psychotherapist helps though?
I think to some extent it does. It's helpful, but it's also harmful, because then I beat myself up and think, oh God, like, why did you, like, get angry so fast? Even though I know the compassionate side of me is like, you're human, you're going to get frustrated. And I'm interested to hear the rest of your thing, but I know that one theme that constantly comes up for me as a parent is the feeling of loneliness, like being so far away from my parents, because it's not how I envisioned parenting. Does that make sense? Like, when you grow up, you have a village, and I don't have a village, and I constantly have this inner battle where I'm just like, why? Why? Does that make sense?
Yes. Kiola, I'm sure you have, because I mean, you're in Missouri. I don't know how you're doing it. I mean, I feel like the rest of us, we see more Caribbean people than you do. So talk to us about your loneliness, if you experience any.
So I don't experience any loneliness in parenting, honestly.
Okay. Well, that's good.
I've been alone. I'm the only person from my immediate family that lives in the US. And this is going on 20 years, 21 years this summer. Give or take some breaks when I was in Trinidad, 6 months here, a year there, that kind of thing. But I've been on my own. And so adaptation to the fact that nobody's around, outside of a romantic relationship or some specific engagement with somebody back home at some point, then there really wasn't any need. I think I just made peace with the idea that I was alone. And then help looks very different for different people. Yes. And the help that I have and the help that has worked for me is the help that I pay for and the help from strangers, because then I can communicate what I want and it's yes or no. And then all I have to deal with is finding a different solution to that. And it's a very business-like or economic approach to what I consider help for me. And I think familial involvement sometimes it conflicts with some of the ideas that may be new or more progressive, depending on what side of the family or which relative it is. So there are things that Con and I have done or will continue to do that was absolutely taboo from the beginning. Because who takes a child who's still drinking from a bottle on the road for months at a time, living in a hotel? Like, who does that? So I heard about that and what he needs and what he needs. And so I had to be firm in what I knew I could give to my son and what he needed versus listen to the voices that told me, because what I was doing was so different that it was not something that should be done. And so that allowed me to solidify and just cement what my parenting style was going to be, because one of the things that I heard or I felt I saw and observed with other people is that you had to choose one thing. You're either a mother or you're not. So there was no symbiotic living. There was nothing saying that you could be who you are and flourish as an individual and as a woman and enjoy mothering. It wasn't always a vantage point that showed me that you can sacrifice with joy. It was one or the other. So I made up my mind from the beginning that I was going to do it how I wanted to. Different was not really the word, but just what made sense to me. Because I knew that for me to enjoy life, I had to find joy and a path that existed along with raising my child the best way that I could. So when
Right.
it comes to discipline,
Mm-hmm.
that one is a up and down, I guess. I because I don't beat. It's not that he hasn't get a pow pow once in a while. He get a little fast hand because that
Mm-hmm.
was my reaction. But I
Right.
have other friends who I've had the benefit of listening and looking at them parenting. And I remember before I even dreamed to have my son, a friend of mine who was just very vocal and adamant that she doesn't beat her children. The end. And I couldn't understand how then do you discipline your children? Because that's what you learn in church. You learn about spare the rod and spoil the child, and all those kind of things. That is the way. But then what has helped me, I mean, what I can explain is what has helped me is when I think about how I speak to my son, I
Mm-hmm.
think about it from an external point of view. If I were looking at somebody else talking to my son or interacting with him, would I be pleased with what I see? Because
Right.
sometimes we treat our children in a way that we want to treat them, but then we want to rip off somebody else's head if they do the same
They
thing.
do the same.
So there are times
Mm-hmm.
when I shout at him or I am impatient with him, and I'm completely valid because that's how I feel in the moment. It's a frustrating situation.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I revisit it, and I'm like, if I heard a teacher or an auntie or an uncle or a stranger talking to him that way, how would I feel? I would want to fight. I would be squaring up with that person or having some
Mm-hmm.
kind of negative interaction with them about it. So that has helped me figure out how to get in with him in the moment. Now, my household is the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. This is a sovereign nation. So once you enter in here, I run things. I'm the prime minister. So much so that the way I speak to Connor, the things that we eat and all the things that we do, I think my entire house reflects our Caribbean culture as well as some other things. But I remember I took him to school at some point and I was doing a parent teacher, I think in kindergarten. And
Mm-hmm.
she was talking. And of course, in my experience, the type of work that I do, I'm in board meetings all the time with, people. And you have to Beckify and unseason the voice a little bit
Right.
to communicate, right?
Right.
And so when I'm speaking to the teacher, because again, we're in the Midwest, you're not in a place where people are used to hearing how we speak. And sometimes they get so caught up in the accent, they're not hearing you. You know
Hearing you.
what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
They're not really listening. So
Mm-hmm.
I modified to be able to be heard. And my son was just like, why are you talking like that? Why you sounding so, mommy? You don't talk like that. And I had to pause in a moment and say, yes, but I'm speaking to, Miss. And Miss
Mm-hmm.
needs to understand what I'm saying. So I
Mm-hmm.
give that example because at home, we use all of the terms, colloquial things and fun things or whatever, but it's who we are. And most of my
Right.
friends are Trinidadian. So when we're on the phone or some Caribbean person, he hears the accents all the time. So it's familiar to him. Follow?
Mm-hmm.
But with regard to the discipline, I still was able to benefit from seeing things that I liked or didn't like. And so parenting for me is very slow. I have to
Mm.
slow things down tremendously because then I have to focus less on what I am trying to convey, but also remember what I'm trying to get him to absorb from what I'm saying. So
Right.
it's frustrating. I mean, it's very frustrating for me because I just want to be like, don't do that, da, 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 and just rile up and just say what I want to say. But
Right.
oftentimes I can't do it. I just have to think about what he's capable of understanding in that moment and have those discussions with him like, why would you do that? Why does that make sense? And so what we've developed is every night we have like a debrief of the day
Mm-hmm.
where because we are still co-sleeping, unfortunately. I have a moment of silence for my space. So at night, when we get into bed, we talk about things like what was the best thing about your day? Who were you kindest to today? What did you like? What's your favorite color and all those things? And through those conversations, I'm able to hear sometimes that how I have disciplined him did not work because he
Mm-hmm.
didn't even understand because I was just so angry or, fussing or quarreling or trying to discipline, even if it's not physical. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't get it. And so it helps me kind of reframe how I discuss things with him as he gets older and as he changes from year to year, I still have to keep changing. So it's slow and it's hard, but it is definitely impactful because I can see what he's learned when I hear how he deals with conflict at school and with other
Right.
children. And then that's how I know what's sticking and what's not sticking. So I
Right.
might
So we'll definitely get to that because I think that's an important point too. But Naette, I know you wanted to interject.
No, I didn't want to interject. I was just responding in my head as she was
Right.
going. One of the things that I found interesting is that where you, and I know that clearly your Caribbean heritage has been helpful in shaping you as a parent, right? I'm not saying that it's not helpful, but where you see like the intervention of the family, the Caribbean community, as not really understanding what you need to do in the moment and how you need to move on with your life, right? And perhaps passing some judgment, which I get as well from time to time, especially from the older relatives. I find the Caribbean community gives me confidence to resist those things, those practices I've encountered here that I find
Do you have an example?
that don't work. So she talked about co-sleeping. When my son was born, you go through, you read all the documents. You cannot sleep on their belly. They have to sleep on their back. You have to take off the blanket, this, that, the other. And you're like, I understand the guidance, but your guidance is based on statistics, right? And my son cannot sleep on his back. He is gargling all night. He's waking up every 10 minutes. He wakes up, he cries, he tries to sleep, he stopped growing, right? And I went back to the village and I was like, what did I sleep on my back or my belly? And my mother was like, on your belly. I asked my uncle. His twin slept on their belly. The tummies in his bed with him and his wife. And I got all this information. It's like a chat on Facebook where I talked about it publicly. And my American friends were like, oh no. Oh no. Crib death. Alarms, crib death. And my Mexican friends were like, put him to sleep on his side so you don't choke on the vomit in the night. And some of them were completely ridiculous. But I got the confidence to put him on his stomach and let him get a good night's sleep. And that has worked with a lot of things that the American medical system does not give me any guidance for. When I was pregnant, don't take any herbs. We don't know what those herbs are for, right? When you breastfeed and don't take this. And I needed the Vervine.
I needed Vervine as well.
I was in Trinidad, and I'm accustomed to bring back my Vervine. Right. But the pediatrician and the obstetrician, the OBGYN and the pediatrician were like, oh no, you can't. You don't know what effect it will have. We have no tests. We have no records of how this works. But Trinidad and how many generations of people drinking Vervine while breastfeeding gave me the confidence to drink my Vervine.
Correct.
And so it like you were saying, is you have to find a middle place that just suits your needs.
And you also need to feel confident in the professionals that make up your multidisciplinary team. So your OBGYN, your pediatrician, whether it's abroad or in Trinidad or in the Caribbean. And because there are some pediatricians in Trinidad who believe in purely breastfeeding your child and they will not support you bottle feeding. Right? There are those. And then there are those that are open to both. So you as an individual, and this podcast is meant for us to have these conversations. So I don't want people coming out of this saying that, oh, I'm going to try putting my child on their belly to sleep because I heard it in a podcast. No, we're going to go with what is recommended scientifically. Yes. We know that sleeping on your back to sleep, sleeping on your back is through research recommended. That's the way that we avoid sudden infant death syndrome. Fine. However, this is an experience that Naette has had, and it actually was my experience with my son as well. He didn't sleep on his stomach. He slept on his side, but the back sleeping didn't work because he had acid reflux. So,
and I took the choice for the first couple nights, I didn't sleep. I was staring at him all night long because I wanted to make sure, okay, maybe this is a risk, but at the same time, at the end, it made more sense for him to sleep on his stomach because he was getting sleep, which he wasn't getting
before. Exactly. So do not take this as an alternative for medical advice. Okay. Right. We're just having a conversation and expressing opinions here. So, all right. So that's really comprehensive. I love that. Love. So now that we know where you guys are positioned in the world and we've created a little bit of context, are there any specific concerns that you have with respect to raising your child based on where you currently reside? So, if we just stick with the pattern of going to Naette first. Naette, you were in Maryland. You were in in the States, the United
Mm-hmm.
States of America, with a biracial child,
Mm-hmm.
right? Tell me about if you have any specific concerns raising him there.
Well, I think that is the biggest thing for me. I mean, right now, you saw him earlier. I mean, he in Trinidad he presents as a white child, no
Mhm,
question. If he was in
mhm.
Trinidad, he'd be a white baby. He comes
Right,
to the United States, he becomes something else, right?
right.
At
Mhm,
sometimes he, is in the off-white category, might be Araby, maybe Indian, and then
mhm.
sometimes people just say, "Well, look at his mother; this is a black child," right?
Right,
What I My concern is having him take on that division, which is what my research is about, right? The way that we perceive people based on the color of their skin and the way we assume that we could presume their descent, that we know
mhm,
where they come from and what they're made of, and therefore what they might do or how they might be. And I think is for me the biggest concern because I want him, and I'm not gonna go and preempt you because there was a question that you had asked us about what we would want the child to know, but he is his
mhm.
own person. His father is coming from the Balkans. I am coming from the Caribbean, right? There might be versions of him, but there is no other him.
Right,
And some sort of racial overlay, some stratification system that someone came up with or some people believe in should not determine where he fits. And
right.
fighting against that is going to be particularly difficult because it is very easy to lean into the privilege of his light skin.
Mhm.
Very
Yes.
easy to encourage him in that direction,
Mhm.
protect him from things that darker skinned children have to face. It is
Yeah.
what it is.
Yes.
Um, and so to sort of ingrain in him an understanding that however he looks, he can be whatever he wants to be. He is a new creation, he is a unique thing, and he can define his path, I think will be the hardest thing, especially when he begins to go to school. Right now, we have complete control over what he sees, right? We were
Yes.
watching Blippy the other day, and Blippy said some nonsense. I
Absolutely.
blocked that. I blocked that episode so fast, right? Because he heard some word that was new to him and he goes, "Oh, that's silly." And I was like, "All right, Blippy, it's not silly, it's just different, right? It's just what you're not used to." And so I can, filter right now, but once he goes out into school, that's it, right? And
Mhm.
so we have to be able to instill, and I'm not even sure what it is, and this is my research, right? I'm not even
Mhm.
sure how to convey how special and different and unique, and this is not just for biracial children, but all children, right? That you cannot be any one of these things. You
Yeah.
can be a new thing,
Mhm.
and I think that's my biggest fear. He sees situations where when he was very little and he was born late in the year, so he wasn't getting any, so he was a very light child. I'm pushing the stroller with his dad, and people would stop and talk to his dad and ignore me as if I was not there,
Yeah.
right? I was the nanny. I was clearly the help. And he has seen this. He has seen it, and he sees more and more of it as he gets older. Children are very observant, and
Mhm. They are.
that that something is a little off, and I have
Mhm.
to find a way to explain that to him without him taking it on.
Mhm.
So it makes the work. It may have been easier if he looked more like me
Mhm.
because I had to walk a road, and I can now give him all my experience and say, well, this has worked for me. But because he doesn't, and he doesn't look like his father exactly either, we have to find a middle way for him.
Mhm. Thank you. And Daniela in the UK.
So I always think it's really interesting, right? So when I got the flock forms, I always pick mixed other, and they have this category says like mixed black and white Caribbean. Like I'm not that
Oh,
because
there's that category?
yeah, they have this on the mix. They have mix and they have like black and white Caribbean is one of the options, and then they have like mixed other. So I was click mixed other because like I'm mixed other,
Mhm.
it is what it is,
Yeah.
and I always think to myself, how fortunate we are in Trinidad in particular to just kind of think this kind of melting pots and how we're raised, to be honest. And so my husband is black, but as we know, slavery. We know our history, right? So the thing about it is that you might look black, but you never know what you have in you. That's reality, right?
Yeah.
Um. So when I was so excited when I was pregnant to see what my my little one would look like, and what that would be. And now it talks about identity. I think that's really important about how I think about my children, because where we live is predominantly white. It does have, there are people, but it's kind of either you're black or you're Indian or you're Chinese or you're white, and it's not like back home where you're very, very mixed. And I still like to explain, because I have taken our kids to kind of be really appreciate culture. And so for example, yesterday was Chinese New Year's. So my granddad was from China. So even though we're not Buddhist, nobody in my family is Buddhist, or we don't celebrate in a really traditional sense, we still celebrated it. And when it's Diwali, we make curry and roti, and we light a diya. When it's Eid, we talk about, we read about we have a book about Eid. And I talk to my kids all the time about their heritage, and I do it more on a cultural aspect, and I try to make sure that the books that they read and they have on their shelves, that it includes diversity, because it's not, for me, it's not that they're biracial, they're just multiracial, they're multi-mixed, and so I have to, and I think it's important for them to understand that you're not just one thing. You're more than just everything. You like this, you like that. You're made up of all these things. And you want to explain all that, because that's what I think about when they go into the world and they have to fill out that form. What are they going to put on that form?
Yeah.
So I currently fill out my forms. I do the paperwork with the family, so it says mixed other for them, because that when they were their dad, people are like, oh, they're black because they have curly hair, they have mixed hair, and that was important. And even that, I had to learn how. Look at my hair. I had to learn how it's a braid, y'all. I am a wash and go kind of person, right? I had to learn how to cane roll. It took me one full year every weekend, right? But it's something I had to learn. And I think that's the thing about with my kids. I think about when you go to school, how are you? You need to understand the way that you are you. Does that make sense? And I see all of that. Just, I know I sound really long-winded, because I think that culture for me is a big part of my children, because where we live, and I try to find friends that we could, they could appreciate cultural differences and celebrate cultural differences as well.
Yeah.
And I don't, Naette talks about, the skin color. That's really important as well, because my kids call me Peach. Right? And I'm like, mommy just has not been in the sun for a really long time. Like, and it's so funny how they view themselves. The little one told me that she's black brown. I was like, all right, cool. The 6-year-old tells me that she's brown. She's, I'm light brown, mommy. All right. Daddy is brown.
Yeah.
What, mommy, you're peach. I used to be pink, by the way, so I've gotten to peach. But and my husband is like, just give it up. You're just peach forever. And I'm like, but I'm not peach. But this is all important. Think about how we're raising our children and how they relate to the world.
Yes.
And especially when you're not just black, because does that make sense? Because it's not one or the other. So I'll stop waffling there, but I hope that helps you.
No, definitely. I think you bring to the fore the fact that now there's there's a spectrum, and in terms of the colors that we see. I mean, I think in the older days, our parents and their generation, it was more clear cut. Okay, black, white, and speaking to Naette's work in terms of identifying where someone is from, you could kind of look at them in the past and be like, oh yeah, she's an Arab, or that's the Chinese person, or whatever. But now everybody is so mixed that you really can't look at someone and say,
But people still try to do it, especially, and I'm gonna jump in here, especially white people in the United States.
Correct.
They love to do the calculus of descent, right?
Correct.
It's almost like they cannot help it.
No.
So you will see somebody who is referred to, and I don't like the term, but clearly racially ambiguous, right? This is not, this is someone who's descendants come from different places. Their grandparents didn't all come from the same place, right?
Right.
That's what I mean by ambiguous. You have a mixture of something going on here. And they will still try to make sense of it. Well,
Yeah.
you know, what therefore are you? You must be, people ask me, what are you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, annoyed is what I am. That's what I am. Right? Because it's not material to the conversation that we're having.
Agreed.
And so what I want to be able to do, and it sounds very ambitious, and I think all parents have these wild ambitions, is to give him a shield of sorts that that will go before him, so that when he, and I sound like I'm preaching, right? It sounds like church, right? I almost want to cover him in the blood of Jesus, because I want you to go out and I want you to be so confident. I want you to be so clear on the fact that your culture, your skin color, your preferences, your family, they're all very different things. So you can exercise or participate in Black culture without being as Black as people want you to be, or you can participate in your Slavic culture without being as white as the Slavs want you to be. But you are you. And to have like a force field that allows you to confront these lay theories of race that want to put him in a box, because he does not belong in a box, any kind of box, right? And so we do a lot of work. One of my friends did a really good job, a woman in Trinidad who sounds like she might be a friend of Kiola's based on something Kiola said, but we'll talk about that off camera. She just did not allow her son to identify people by color until he was about 11. Wow. So now when people come with the like peach, he doesn't try to do math. It's just peach, right? It's just brown. And so, you know, I don't know what my strategy will be, because my situation is of course different, but that is what I want to sort of immunize him against, just having to go into a category. I'm going to shut up.
And but it's true. And one thing I had to talk about my kids about, I never thought I would have to talk about this earlier on, but when they went to school, we talked about racism, you know, in a really nice way, by the way. We just talked about, you know, it's, you know, people will look different, and that's all right, you know, but we treat people the same. We talk about equality a lot at home, by the way, and discrimination, but it's a conversation my parents didn't have with me. I'm going to be very honest. Nobody had that conversation with me. And I had to discuss that with my 5-year-old, because I thought it was important that she come and tells me, because she is one of 2 out of 15 children, you know, that is the reality. I need you to know. I need to know if something's happening, because, you know, like Naette said, I will get in there, and you need to know so you can figure it out. And so it's not a conversation I ever thought I would have so early on, but we talk about it regularly.
Right. And Kiola, because I know you're in Missouri. Missouri just has a different meaning altogether.
Missouri has a different meaning altogether.
Yeah.
I wish I was taking notes. I have so many different comments. And
listen to me, you guys are going to make this a 2-parter if you'll continue talking the way y'all talking, right?
Because it's a lot. It's a lot. I'm going to try to stay. I cannot be succinct, but I will try to stay on task with regard to explaining how that has been for us. I feel like I was thrust into having conversations about race and skin color well before I was prepared to.
Right.
Connor and I moved to Missouri from Delaware. And we moved to Delaware from New Jersey. So when we were in New Jersey, when Connor was born, I had to have his paperwork adjusted because he came out. He was a little jaundiced, and his father's lighter skinned than I am. He's also a Black man. He's a Black person, but they put him as a white child. So that was one. So I had to get that changed before. And if you'd see his pictures, I was just like, they just couldn't understand why he was so light and I was so dark. So they just put white, because it makes no sense to me. That was one. And it was immaterial in that moment. But Connor looked a little on the Hispanic side for the early part of his years. Like I would say 1 through 3. That's whenever we go anywhere, and where we live, there was enough Hispanic people at the time, and they would talk to him in Spanish and not even talk to me, and he would just be like, and I would say, "Oh, we're from Trinidad," and they will talk to him and speak to him in Spanish again, and then look at me, and I was like, and there was one time we were traveling in a Spanish-speaking country, and an older lady pretty much had the person with her, like, tell me off that I'm not raising my child in his heritage
Wow.
because he should know Spanish. Clearly, he's a Hispanic, clearly. And I mean, like, Tance was going in. And so I was like, we are from Trinidad and Tobago, and we're really close to Venezuela, but we speak English. Like, we really do. And the only thing she didn't do was put me on Maury for a DNA test to let me know that you understand, I was wrong. So then, I mean, all kicks aside, when we moved to Delaware, it was a lovely mix. Our community was we had a lot of transient people in that community. So people who worked in the bank, in my industry, in the banking industry, who would be there on site for like a year or two, whatever. So it was always a revolving door of people. So everybody lived where we lived. White, Black, Bangladeshi, Indian, Asian. I mean, like from all over the world. So there was never any obvious differences. Even in the daycares that he would attend, there was always a mix. We'd see some differences in certain areas, but we had a really good time. Like I really didn't have to deal with any issues. And one of Connor's best friends are little white boys, and they've always said they're twins. If they wear a gray shirt, we're twins. If they wear a blue shirt, we're twins. It was the sweetest thing. Now, when we moved here, the introduction to race and obvious differences was just so glaring, and it was like an assault on my senses, and it was just a lot. Within the first term that Connor was in kindergarten, there was an issue where a little boy flat out told him that you should die because you're Black.
Wow.
And so, I mean, obviously, y'all didn't see me on the news, so I was able to manage. But it took a lot for me to break that down, because my issue with them is I can't change the demographic of the place that we've chosen to move, because that's pretty much, it's a choice that I made to move from the East Coast to the Midwest. But at the same time, I have to protect my son, and I have to be sure that he is able to understand who he is outside of somebody weaponizing or dehumanizing him because of his color.
Yeah.
And so in his school, I think it's about 6 grades altogether, and there may be 10 Black children. And some of those Black children are Black via being biracial or multiracial. So it's constantly reaffirming with him who he is. And so I stuck things on his bathroom, telling him he's brave, he's wonderful, he's smart, he belongs anywhere, he can do anything, those kind of affirmations. And I got a lot of support from a ton of friends, because of course I posted about it on social media. I posted some of the information exchange with some of the other parents, the parents of the child, and other things that happened with him. And so kindergarten was full of me having to completely switch up my focus and just build my son up every single day before he left the house. And so that's one thing that I know he was not going to have to deal with if you were in Trinidad, is that. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of the support, of course, because I am very connected to everybody outside of where we live, because to live abroad for so long means there's no way for me to be connected without being connected in some way electronically. So whether it's some form of social media, telephone calls, or visiting and that kind of thing. And so I post about our experiences because it is very different from what other people might be experiencing. And we don't oftentimes think outside the box. So by posting, I got a lot of responses from other parents who are dealing or navigating their own, issues with stuff like that, that helped me kind of understand what to do or get advice or feedback or whatever on how I could support my son, support him dealing with that. And so for the first time, I had to tell him that he was Black, because I mean, like, when do you do that? When do you really wake up and say, I'm going to tell my son that he's Black? You know what I mean? Like when do you have to say that? He knows that he's a boy. He knows his age. He knows, you know what I mean? He's smart and loved and all those things. But I've had these children who are then being raised by people who mean that they must label, like they must label him. They must tell him. They have to tell him who he is. And I was like, people don't get to tell you who you are. These are the things. You happen to look a certain way. So for months, all he did was talk about skin.
Mm.
Light skin, brown skin, dark skin, skin like yours, mommy, skin like mine, mommy, lighter than you, mommy, mommy. And so when he talked about children, he wouldn't remember their name. He would say XYZ did this and they have light skin, and XYZ did that and they have brown skin, kind of like mine and kind of like yours, mom. So I had to fill my house with all these books and images of brown people doing all sorts of things. Brown people cutting hair and what hair looked like, and going on adventures and all those things, to just kind of flood him with positive images outside of what he's being told. And on top of that, we went out to brunch one morning, and because we do, go out and eat and stuff, and we were sitting down, and a young fella came in with light skin, a white boy and his girlfriend. They're young adults, and he looked at me and he was just like, I wish I had skin like him. I don't want my skin anymore. So, at that point, the earth opened up, and I went in, and then I had to come back out and just be present in the moment. Because when you talk to children, you'll understand, we all understand when we talk to our children that they might say one thing and it means something else. But because we've had so many issues or important issues, things that happened before that affected that discussion and presented that to us in a negative way, I had to be sure that I ticked all of the boxes to make sure, like, is it because he doesn't like his skin? Is it because somebody said something to him? Is this a residual issue from what happened or something he's hearing? And children can only communicate but so well at a certain age. So in the end, fortunately, I believe it was more about him wanting the hairstyle, because he understood that if you look a certain way, your hair textures a certain way, and you can get a certain type of haircut. But I had all bells ringing in my head. Like, I just did not know what to do. And so for me, it's like you want to respond in that moment. So all I've done, especially when he shocks me or these instances happen, he has situations like this, is I always tell him I'll revisit it. Be like, that's very interesting. Do you mind if I think about it? And I talk to you about it again. And then I reach out, I post about it, I ask questions, I talk to my friends and stuff. And then I kind of, do some research and figure out ways that I can talk to him about it sometimes. And then when I revisit it, sometimes it's more than it needs to be. But it's a continuous situation. And I've seen, there's just so much I could tell you about what that experience has been for us. Being in a place where we are the minority. And so it's a lot. And I don't think it's going to get better. So if I had anything I wanted, it would be for him to keep experiencing what diversity is in its entirety, not by me just pinpointing specific people and pictures and shows, to reaffirm who he is and how he can feel good about who he is because of the skin that he's in. I was not ready. I definitely was not ready.
Yeah.
Naette? Yeah, it's just a comment, and I think you're doing an excellent job distilling.
I think so.
I mean, Missouri, it is what it is. That part of the world is what it is. And you are in a tough spot. And based on what you said, I think you're doing a fantastic job. But I just want to express the anger and frustration when I think about this, because at that age, white mothers are not doing the same work with their children. They don't have it. And so they get to just be kids. And children who don't look like them and that is why I'm adamant that I will not let Buria slip through. In those instances where, so for example, let's say we move back to the Caribbean, I will not let him slip through. I will do my best to raise him to be accountable for the effect of how he looks on other people. The fact that the police will stop him, but they will let him go. Like in Trinidad, they will think twice before they lock him up. They wouldn't drop him on the concrete one time. He needs to be aware that he is walking around with that kind of power for no reason other than the DNA that he got. But it makes me angry to think that children's childhoods are being cut short, and their mothers are doing this extra emotional labor to not just protect them and teach them, but to protect them from people who shouldn't be a threat.
Right.
One thing I'd like to say is we do have some close friends. Mom is British. They're both white. It's a white couple, white children. Mom is British, your father is American, and the little boy and Connor are best friends. Well, we left them back in Delaware, unfortunately. And they did ask. They asked me how they could support Connor, support us. And I don't know if what they intended by that question, but I took the opportunity to explain to them how things look differently to me than they look to them. And the fact that as long as they remain friends, I would love for them to assist me in having their son understand his voice carries. You know what I mean? His voice is going to have weight when they are together, because these little children cannot, as you say, children who don't look like us can enjoy certain things. They don't have to overthink things. Like when I first started in my detail as an officer, I didn't tint my car. I was driving in the middle of the country to go and examine places where people came up to me flat out and was just like, "You're not from here." Like, they didn't say good morning, they didn't say good evening. And the only thing that kept me from having some interaction or altercation is the fact that they knew that I represented the law in a certain capacity. So it is always having a target. So, I mean, like, you know, it was a means of making money, a career, and those kind of things. But I was afraid. There were times that I was afraid, you know. So we would rush back to our hotel and stay there because I didn't want to go out in the place and try to go out and have dinner somewhere or pick up food on the way. And it's not that it's like that everywhere. And it's not that when I go in, I'm afraid and there are people with pitchforks or anything like that. Most people think that they're not doing anything wrong by the way that they communicate with you and the things that they insist on discussing, because we live in a certain place where people believe certain things and there are certain values that they uphold. And so the way that I present us and how I speak up for us, it challenges that status quo somewhat. You know, where do I get off? How do I, you know? So I have to toe a very fine line, because I also want to be sure that the attention that's placed on him is one that he can flourish with that attention and get the help that he needs, versus him having a target on his back where he is isolated and allowed, you know, people are allowed to do him anything. So I have to still not only rely on administrators at the school or wherever we go, but to speak to him about what he is allowed to do and who he is. So I tell him, it's like, you know who you are. You know, we don't believe negative things about ourselves that other people tell us. You get to be the voice that you hear. Let's talk about who you are. And I have him repeat, who are you? You know, when children say this and the other, what do you think about those things? But who are you? You know, because they are going to say those things to you. And it's just more support than I think I needed to give somebody who's 5 or 6. He turned 7 on Friday. He is not a big kid, you know, but it's really giving positive reinforcement continuously. And it's never ending, you know, it's never ending, because I can't let up and have somebody else speak to him in a way that makes him feel devalued or etches away at the foundation that I am building in his mind right now because of where we live, you know? So it's a challenge.
Yeah. And I think for our listeners who are still residing in the Caribbean, they may not even appreciate that this is the amount of work that needs to go in to just raising a child just because you're outside of the Caribbean. A lot of these issues, not saying that in the Caribbean is perfect. We know, like Naette said, there's privilege in the Caribbean as well. However, there are certain conversations that we did not have to experience with our parents or friends or families because those situations didn't exist. So this is new to all of us, I think.
Yeah.
And it is tiring. I know it can be tiring. As Naette said, it can make you angry, and it makes you question, you know, if you made the right choice in terms of location as well.
I think
Naette?
one of the things about the comparison with the region is how much more sophisticated the prejudice in the Caribbean is.
Mm.
And it is not the same ignorant prejudice. So I remember one time it's funny now. Sometime around an election, I was going to work. I was at a television station at the time. My hair was flat iron, and I got in a taxi and I going up the road. Me and the taxi driver alone. Lovely Indian gentleman in a big old car. And he started to talk to me about the PNM and the blacks. and how they this and how they that, right? But the thing about it was that he automatically assumed that I was a card carrying non-PNM, right?
Correct.
And it was interesting to be on the other side of this, but I can have that experience in Trinidad, right? I could cross a line in Trinidad. Can't cross any lines here, right?
No.
When people use a lot of coded language to be racist in Trinidad. So when somebody says somebody is Rango Tango, the image in your mind is never a Syrian Lebanese,
No.
never a Chinese person, might
That
be
is
Indian
correct.
either, right?
One.
But it is more sophisticated because there are ways to leave that Rango Tango group, right? There are things that you can be other than that, even if you look a certain way. In the United States, I don't have much experience with the UK, but in the United States, there is a black box. You're in there, and that's it. Whatever happened in there happened. Nobody could explain how it's happening, but you can't come out of it. And I think that speaks to our intelligence, like just a different kind of intelligence in the region that we don't ever, I don't think we play up enough. And people like us who live outside of the region should be using that intelligence to educate. It's like how my granny will cook curry for Eid and my Muslim friends, curry pork for Eid. And my Muslim friends will buy a turkey ham for Christmas. And we participate in each other's cultures. We have a kind of sophisticated expertise when it comes to diversity and inclusion that other people don't have. And so I don't play by the rules of the people I meet. So, for example, you talked about beckification of the language when you're on the phone, when you're at work. I drag them through a 101 in how to understand a Trini, because I'm not giving you that this is my skill, right? The fact that I could incorporate Hindi, like I know what Mastana Bahar is, I call cumin jira. I know these things because of where I'm from, and I don't want to lose any of that in my interaction with you, because my job is almost to teach you. Because look at how well we do this thing, how well we integrate, and how poorly you do it. You're struggling. Like how many decades after civil rights, you're still struggling. Yet still, we have a population known as Douglas.
Yeah.
We respect and accept that they are a part of who we are. So I try not to give in too much to their structure. It's difficult. It makes my life a lot harder. I could do it because my child is still small.
Correct.
But that is how I struggle against it. Not to lose the sophistication that I was raised with, to sort of succumb to their version of how things should be.
And I mean, this brings me to the next topic that I really wanted to address, because this podcast is not just about the conversation, but it's also about finding the resources that are out there, or tips and tricks and hacks that, cultural hacks that we can use to help us, right? So, for instance, I mean, I feel like the reason why I had to have Kiola on the podcast is because I interacted with Kiola late last year, and I witnessed her interaction with Connor firsthand. And I said, oh my God, this is on another level, right? Like, I thought I was doing an okay job with my son, but when I saw that, I'm like, okay, Chanel, you have some work to do, right? Just the intelligent conversations that she was having with Connor, the fact that he had emotional intelligence at 6, and just so many facts, the way that she's able to express herself clearly. She has thought about this, she's reflected on what she thinks works, and she's almost like a veteran. She's not a veteran quite yet, but almost on her way there. So I feel like there are things that she uses and tools that she uses that we can share with everybody. And so I want to ask, well, I know for me, the timeouts work for Kyrie with the discipline, but it did not work when he was 2 years, when he was a year old, right? I mean, it started working when he was around 18 months and older. So I kind of struggled for that first year, because I'm trying to figure, okay, he's only a year. He can't really understand. He can't communicate. He doesn't get timeout. He's just crying. 18 months to 2 years, okay, he's getting better at it and it works now. He's almost 3. And I think like, okay, he knows timeout. He can figure it out, right? But there are a lot of other tools out there that I feel like we've not had the pleasure of being exposed to because our parents, you just got the eye, or you just got the pinch, or you just got the slap, and you knew what to do. So, you know,
No.
and
And he
there's
does not have enough clothes on. I'm sorry.
Hi, Connor. So, I don't know if Kiola, you want to just give us one tool that you used that helps. Let's specifically talk about discipline because I feel like that's a big thing
Oh,
for us.
goodness.
I know. So, like, because in the heat of the moment, I just want to snap. That's me. I just like,
Yes.
what are you doing? Right? I don't know how to adjust that to then, I don't know, you do a whole lot of reflection and all that in between and come up with a response in like 5 seconds. I don't know how to do that. So
Well,
maybe talk me through that initial reaction.
oh,
I know I put you on the
there's a
spot.
lot. Connor turned 7. No, it's fine. I'm fine with sharing, but it's
Mhm.
not I don't have steps. I don't have like these are the 10 steps that I have. There was a lot of trial and error, and there's a lot of emotion
Mhm.
involved in it, or in the psychology of it, I guess.
Mhm.
Because when I thought about what I want out of the relationship with Connor and I, it was understanding that he was a person.
Mhm.
That was very important to me. And that came from some of what I felt as a child and what stayed with me. When I was a child, I felt like when you get big, you could do children what you wanted. That was
Mm.
a goal when you became an adult. I can't wait till I get big. I could tell children what I want, because that is some of what I experienced. That is what resonated with me. I had teachers who were
Mhm.
very mean in primary and secondary school. And
Mhm.
then my parents were dealing with their own situations. They were raising us, they were taking care of us, our needs were met. But I am a different parent to that, because I up in the school. I have time. I will always have time to be there at
Mhm.
school, to have a
Mhm.
discussion,
Mhm.
and to sit and speak and ask questions and all those things and see if I need help. But it was very much the teacher is the boss of you, right? And so the parent did not stand in a gap. And so I knew from some of the experience that I had, I wanted to advocate for my son. So
Mhm.
that's the first thing. He's a person. And then understanding that I'm raising him for everybody else, not for me. I'm just fortunate enough to have the responsibility of doing it. And there's sometimes when it's not so fun, and there are times when it's fun. And so when I thought of it from that perspective, I wanted to I am trying to create a pathway where my son doesn't see me as mommy from 1 to 18, and then at 18 he meets me as an adult. I
Mhm.
want him to meet me as a person that I am, even though right now relationship is very much based on my responsibility for him, the things that I have to take care of or whatever. But I do know, again, from my own experience, when I met my parents as people for the first time, and it was jarring. I
Yeah.
had to see my mother as a woman, as a person,
Mhm.
and how
Mhm.
all these experiences that she had made her who she was, and why our relationship is as it is or isn't, why she did all those things, what help she had or did not have. But I had to learn who she is as a person outside of mommy. Same for
Mm.
my father. So I mean, I can't put all of my proclivities on Connor, and these are the pensions. I like this or like that, but with him and I actually actively living together, then
Mhm.
he understands how I favor things. And so that has built into some of the emotional intelligence for him, because I will hear it where he'll say, "Oh, mommy, I know you want to eat first before I ask you for something else. I'm going to wait for you to eat first and then ask you a question." How did he come to that conclusion? Because he got brought up once or twice where I said, "Let me eat. I want to eat first. Give me a chance. I fed you first. Mommy's tired. Let me sit down for a minute." And it softened because, again, frustration, right? Spur of the moment. And then I realized all he was hearing is anger and not understanding the meat of the matter. So I
Mhm.
then slowed down my responses, because one thing with children, or with my son specifically, they are repetitive. They're going to do something else in the same way. So then you're ready. You understand? The first time it might catch you. And then where the discipline part of it, where I fly off the handle, because it still happens. A
Mm-hmm.
friend of mine, in another forum, I think one of the online forums, um, somebody was talking about their discipline, and people were talking about, yeah, so you have to beat them and that kind of thing. And I remember my friend commenting, and she said, people beat because they're frustrated. Think
Mm-hmm.
about whatever that child has done, and you're not in a frustrated state. How would you behave? Would you still just beat them? Wouldn't you
Mm-hmm.
stop for a minute and think? So I
Mm-hmm.
focus more on calming me than dealing with the problem.
Yeah.
Let me calm me first, so I am the best me, I'm in the best state of mind, and then I can deal with him. Because two
Mm-hmm.
of us might as well just hold one another and cry, like when they're babies and they're up in the night and they're crying and you're tired. Both all crying. You're
Yeah.
rocking. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing, just that we have more tools. They can talk, they can express themselves a little better. So for me, it's really calming myself first and taking that time. It means sometimes that I cannot react right away. If it's not a
Right.
safety issue, then I do
Right.
not force myself to respond in that manner.
Mm-hmm.
And my work has forced me to also slow down. So if I can exercise that control in the workplace, then I can exercise even more that control at home. It's
Boom.
not
Yeah.
it's not open season on my son. He should not be
Mm-hmm.
victim to my emotions. So when I think about him as a person, I think about how valuable he is, because if I'm protecting my job, I've gone on a job where I'm in the boardroom meeting with everybody for this $1 billion institution, and they wouldn't shake my hand. They were men who passed me over and shook hands over my shoulder just to make sure I knew that I was not there. Now, of course, inside my mind, I want to cat spraddle everything, but I smiled. You know what I mean? And I acknowledge them because I know who I am in that room. Even if you decide you do not want to acknowledge me, I know who
Mm-hmm.
I am. So I have to remember who my son is, that he is
Mm-hmm.
a person. And these experiences that we have, I could choose the ones that I want him to remember, but he's going to pick the ones that matter to him. You follow?
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
I need to try to cast a wider net and say, let me give him a little more experiences with mommy not flying off the handle than those being at the forefront. And so I don't really have like a clear cut. I just have had a little more time and a
Mm-hmm.
little more patience than I
Mm-hmm.
thought I ever could have. And I think if life picking kids or kids picking you as a brand tub, I got the best prize in the brand tub with my son,
Aww,
because
that's
he
sweet.
has really been, and with that in mind, I don't know if I want to play that lottery again, because I might get a whole different type of child, and the same approach
For
me,
real.
because that child I might have to snatch them up more than not. What you're talking.
Exactly.
You know what
I
I'm
know.
saying?
I
So
know.
it's not a, it's he's also, I've had more time and I've had a lot of failures along the way. And so I just think practicing that moment where I just still myself first and think about what I want the outcome to be, how what I want his takeaway to be, what is he going to learn from that,
Mm-hmm.
and know that it's a building block, then it helps me do things a little differently. So
Yeah. So Danielle, I want to bring you in because you've been quiet,
That's
and
fine.
you have two. You have two
I
little ones.
do. Oh my
How do
goodness.
you manage? Any tips, tricks, hacks that you want to give to us?
I think the first
Oh.
thing for me was I think I had to grieve not
Mm-hmm.
having my parenting away from my family and what I had in my mind
Mm-hmm.
envisioned when I was going to have children. Because I was the one to have at least one child, but my reality is not what I had ever dreamed it would be. I
Right.
genuinely thought I'd be happy in, Digger Martin, granny and grandma down the road. And I think it took me a long time, I think, to accept that literally it's myself and my husband. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to think about what was important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I made a decision, and I'm very happy with my decision, is I want to do pick up and drop off. I know it sounds really small, but actually that's my value, to connect and to be there as a parent, because you know what? They don't have granny and granddad to spoil them. They don't have an auntie and
Right.
uncle to spoil them.
Mm-hmm.
Not that spoiling is important, but you know what I mean? Like they don't have that extra, you know, support that we grew up with. And I do think about that quite a lot. So for me, I thought about, first of all, what's important to me. What kind of mom would I like to be? Not in a perfect sense, but in a realistic sense.
Mhm.
And thinking about how do I want to show up for my children and how do I want to show up for myself. And I think parts of it is that life is very busy, and all of us, we respond really automatically, in
Mhm.
situations like you said. We just get angry, respond in a moment, and that's normal as human life.
Mhm.
But what for me was the biggest thing, I think, the last couple of years, and particularly the pandemic kind of brought to light, is just being more aware of my own feelings,
Mhm.
my own thoughts, and really taking a pause sometimes. For example, like when sometimes my kids cry to wash their hair and I'm not hurting them, literally. I'm just like, you want to do it yourself, please do it yourself. Like, I'm
Right.
happy to help, I'll assist, like, I mean, the little one I have to help, but the almost 6-year-old, we've been doing this for a while. And sometimes I find myself getting angry, and what I noticed is that I try where possible to take space in a really safe way. So, like the day she was just screaming in the shower, and I was like, I don't know why you're screaming. I could
Yeah.
hypothesize that you're very tired, you're overtired,
Mhm.
who knows? Um, and I just said to her, in this moment, I'm getting very overwhelmed. I'm just going to take a couple of seconds outside, meaning just outside the bathroom door. I left the bathroom door when she was fine. I
Mhm.
took a couple of deep breaths, and then I came back and I said, okay, how would you like us to do this moving forward? You have this choice or that choice. And I
Mhm.
gave what I think was two realistic choices. Not you do this by yourself. I say, I need to monitor. So it's either A, you monitor and you ask me for help, or B, I do it for you. But something have to
Right.
happen.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Um, and
Your hair
what I
getting
have,
washed.
yeah,
Your hair is getting
yeah,
washed today.
exactly.
Realistic
We have no
options for them. It's so good. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, listen, we have no choice here. You have to wash. You understand? Like,
Mhm.
there's non-negotiable, pal. This is what
Mhm.
it is. And one thing that I do, which I mean, my mom was really lovely, and I always think that she said really lovely. I would she like the way how she set boundaries. I never felt like it was super strict, if that makes sense, and I always adhered to it. But I think because sometimes I don't have that space, I know that I get frustrated really easily sometimes, especially after a long day. If I've had a tricky day at work, um, I get frustrated, and if I raise my voice, I'll go back and say, especially if it was unwarranted. I mean, it's like I said to you all, if it's a parking lot, I'm not going to apologize for that, because I don't want
Yeah.
you to get knocked down and die. That is the
Mhm.
long and short of it, right? But if it
Mhm.
is that, I was short, I actually go back to them and apologize. I make it a point to, like you said, and I said, you know, I just want to let you know, I'm really sorry I raised my voice and I shouted. Um,
Mhm.
you know, I am sorry. And I talked to them about, this is why, I kind of said to you 10 times to please do something, and you didn't listen to me. And I don't want to shout. And I needed to listen a bit earlier on. So I apologized for it, but I tried to give them context about, you know, 10 times how much times I will talk, especially,
Yeah.
time passing, you have to go and do dinner and all these things. But I try to apologize, but not excuse my behavior. I apologize and I give context around it. And I would say, if you're parenting outside of the Caribbean, I think fine. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I needed to get, and I had to create a community. This is the only way I stay sane, honestly. Just because I like I said to you, I never thought I would parent so far away from my
Mhm.
family. So my well, we call them childminders. It's similar to a babysitter,
Mm-hmm.
but they're regulated, if that makes
Oh,
sense.
okay.
So they have to get
Mhm.
a specific training. So my childminder, she's amazing. She's Portuguese, she has ras, like, she's amazing, so she's very cultural with my kids. And I have a mom friend, and it's only two people, but that's what I needed.
Mhm.
Before I had them, like, in my life, I was literally in tears on a regular, because I
Yeah.
felt lonely in my journey. My husband is amazing, don't get me wrong, but because how I planned to have my children wasn't my reality,
Mhm.
and I hadn't gone through the grief process of that loss, like acknowledging and accepting that loss.
Yeah.
I'm there on that journey now. I've accepted it.
Mm-hmm.
But that for me, that was really instrumental. Just having two people in my neighborhood or area who I could be like, you know what? Oh my God, these children are driving me like absolutely mental,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
And I still struggle, to be honest, with taking time for myself. I
Mm-hmm.
know they talked about babysitters. Because of my line of work, I'm a bit always hesitant about people,
Absolutely.
just because I know I hear the horrors
Yeah.
of
Uh-huh.
human life. So, you know, and I think because of that, I'm just a little less willing at this
Oh.
point in my
Mm-hmm.
life to have a babysitter. People tell me all the time, why don't you just get a babysitter, go out? And I just think to myself, I'll wait until we have a family member come to visit. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's when I wait. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I
Okay,
think
well,
yeah.
thank you so much for sharing. And so, as we wrap up, I like to ask, well, this is the second to last thing that I'm going to ask. But firstly, I want to ask everyone, just to lighten up the mood a little bit, um, to share a song about their journey that's representative of their journey. So, we'll go around, just your song and maybe why, Nayat.
No, I have to go last because I'm the person who didn't have a song, remember?
Oh,
So I have to think really
okay,
hard. Like
Kiola.
a pop
Okay,
quiz.
Kiola. Kiola, go. You first.
So my friend suggested that Not an Easy Road is Buju who sang that song.
Yes,
I don't
yes,
know if that's the
yes.
name of the song, but that line in itself
I feel
completely
that's the
embodies.
I feel that's the
Is
name.
it?
I think
That
so.
Not an Easy Road would be the one. It would really
Mm-hmm.
just be it because it's not an easy road. It's a
No.
long journey and it's still not easy regardless. A lot of saying sorry, mommy, sorry. A lot of lessons to learn. A lot of things I have to learn about him as he becomes who he is. It's not easy, you know. It's
Mm-hmm.
not easy. So
All right.
that would be
Good
my.
one. Good one.
Mhm.
Daniela.
So I don't know if you all have seen Vivo on Netflix.
Mhm.
But there's a song. Oh, you all need to watch Vivo. It's very lovely.
I saw it.
So
Oh.
there's a song called "Keep the Beats," which I think is really helpful because it talks about when things go wrong or when things don't go as planned, what can you do? And he says, you know, when my tanks run dry, I just see what's in reserve. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, when I think about therapy in life, you know, I just thought that song just completely embodies what all I can do is just you lean into whatever is happening and you try your
Mm-hmm.
best. That literally is all we can do as parents, you
Mhm.
know.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Nayat, we give you enough time.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
There is a band called Kobo Town. Does anybody know Kobo Town? Kobo Town is actually a Trini band based in Canada. And they
Oh.
have a very beautiful song called Before the Day Star. So it's not that I don't have a song. I have a
Mm-hmm.
playlist that I built
Oh.
while I was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I heard a song that made me think of him, I would add it. So there are lots of songs on here. Ben
Right.
45, The Luckiest. This song by Kobo Town, I think Space for a Heart by Freetown Collective.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, his name, we were trying, well, so we knew his name would be Buria, which means storm. And we knew that before, I knew it before he was conceived. His father also knew it
Really?
before we met each other. And then we talked about it. We had the same name. And then we were thinking about
Okay.
that.
Wait. How? How? How?
So it's random. My sister babysat for a couple who was not from Trinidad, who lived in Federation Park, came back. This is like, she was like 15. So
Right.
I would have been like 18. I heard the
Mm-hmm.
name, put it in the back of my head, moved on with life.
Oh
Always
my
thought it was a
goodness.
wonderful name, wanted to have it. When he got married, he wanted to name his child Buria, and his ex-wife was like, no, let's name him something else. And we had that conversation. It was wild. And then one day we
Oh
were
my
driving in the
God.
car listening to Freetown Collective. And the first line of Space for a Heart is I was born to be a storm. And
Mm.
it's like, that's what we done. That's it. That's the
We're
name.
done.
No question. So that one is significant. So I have a lot of them, but Kobo Town's Daystar, before the Daystar, is like, you know, you were in creation before the sun. Before there was a son, there was a you. And so
Mhm.
don't allow people to strip you of the things that you are. Just be as eternal as the sun is to
Oh,
you.
I love that. So
That
you
is
guys
really,
have to send me links to these songs because I need to
I
put this
know.
in.
I'll have to
Because
check
I'm
it
like,
out.
I want to listen to these. Yeah, definitely. Wonderful. And the last thing I'm gonna ask, because yeah, this is definitely now a two-parter, um, is a message. And it doesn't have to be a long message, but just in case any of the kids get to watch this or listen to it as a podcast, what's one message that you want to send to them today? Starting with Kiola.
Ah, because I'm the one who always has chatty.
Yes, yes, but you don't need to be chatty right now, okay? Go ahead.
Um,
Message in a
my
bottle.
message for my son would be that I love him so much. Everything I do is because I love him, and
Mhm.
I think the world of him. And becoming a mom has really, as cliched as it sounds, it's completely changed my life, and he's made me seek to be the best version of myself that I could be for him. That's what I
Right.
would love for him to know.
Oh, thank you. And Daniela.
I think I want them to know that I tried my best every day.
Mhm. Mhm. And you're
I
doing
love them.
great. Oh. All right, and Naya.
I would say to him, very lovely. You are absolutely meant to be, um, and you are perfect no matter what happens. And I want you to always remember that. It's not just that mommy said it. A lot of cosmic work went into you being here, and
Mhm.
you belong. Just like
Mhm.
everything else that is here, you belong.
Yes, amen to that. Ladies, oh my gosh, I this was just a really fabulous chat. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this. And maybe season 6, we might revisit it when all the kiddos are older and we have different, or maybe we're in different locations or whatever. Hopefully, you're open to doing this again. But thank you so much for today. We appreciate you. You are all doing fantastic jobs raising your children abroad and just raising your children, period.
Period.
Yeah. So thank you. And yeah, until we meet again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.